Hello and welcome to Trojan Talk. I'm your host, Aaron Taylor. With me today is Ed Noriega, here to talk about a book about the famed Pike County native artist, Nall Hollis. Thank you for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
And there's a new book that you had a big hand in putting together about the work of Nall Hollis. And a lot of folks from this area, especially Troy University, know his work on display at the International Arts Center. But this book helps, I guess, break the surface of that art, right? And give it a little bit more insight in what folks can get from this. So tell us about what it took to put this together and tell what you were trying to tell in this book.
Well, I think first of all, what I'd like to say is it was a tremendous honor to be able to design this book, and that what the book gave me was, or the process of designing the book gave me the ability or an insight to Nall's work that I had never really considered before. One of the things that I had realized was that you can't really look at Nall's work from a distance. His work is beautiful. It's gorgeous to look at. He does these incredible frames, custom-made frames. He's an excellent draftsman. He's a great painter. He's an excellent printmaker. But what gets missed a great deal of the time because of this, all of the presentation, is the depth of his work. And in designing the book, I began to realize as I was looking at his work that I couldn't just show the piece independent of itself on a page. A lot of times I found myself having to blow up the work and really starting to look at the symbolism, the imagery, the draftsmanship, the craftsmanship of each piece. And I was finding myself lost in the work in a really good way. In a way that I had never really studied Nall's work before or appreciated Nall's work.
And now you had a relationship with Nall. You've known him for many years, but this added a different dimension to it in working with this.
Exactly. It was an opportunity to be able to spend quality time with each piece and to really begin to study the work as he created it. And then almost having sort of a frightening experience because we at some point realizing that what the artist Nall was doing was revealing his life in his work. And then all of a sudden for me there becomes this sense of almost voyeurism that I didn't realize was there, and it has always been there. And if you look at his work, and I'll give you an example, he has a piece called Adam, Eve, and Darwin. And on the surface, you would think it's sort of a commentary piece about Adam and Eve and the apple. And as a sideline, I want to mention that in the book, there are QR codes throughout the book. So if you are looking at the book and you run across Adam, Eve, and Darwin, you get your phone and put it on the QR code, and you get a video of him talking about the piece. And in preparation for this interview, I did review the video again today, and it hit me that this piece is all about Nall's recent divorce, and it was a nasty divorce, and he talks about this divorce, and he talks about the relationship between man and woman, or Adam and Eve, and then he goes into the details of that, the pieces that are in the piece and how relevant they are to, or how they relate to what he had been going through. And so, it becomes somewhat voyeuristic, but it's all sort of, Nall is the creator and we're the audience. And so, I would encourage anybody that goes to the Nall Museum to not just look at the pieces from a distance, to really walk up to them and study them and look at the small nuances, the details, because they all have meaning behind them.
And so what does knowing this background story, the narrative, this additional narrative, do as a viewer? Both you're an artist, and you're also a viewer of art and someone who understands it. So what is knowing that background, how does it change your impression of some of these works?
It's in the interpretation. I think the other thing that I learned about Nall, and that I know about Nall, and his premise for his work is that he wants people to interpret his work. He doesn't want to tell them everything and what they're supposed to think. He wants you to walk up to his work and to really make your own identification, make your own story from it, even though it was generated from something that's very much about him and his personal life. He wants you to become absorbed into that work and to be able to make the interpretation that you wish to make. And I think that was a thing that I started doing. I mentioned earlier that I recently read a book by Oscar Wilde, The Picture of Dorian Gray. And in the beginning of the book, it talks about how when an artist creates, what they do is they reveal a great deal, or they give a certain part of themselves to the piece, and therefore, you know, they sort of deplete what they have and put it onto the piece that they create. And for me, this is the quintessential, you know, Nall for me. He is the quintessential Dorian Gray, where he is, you know, he creates work that is commentary on society, and he uses humor and he uses symbolism in a way that just, I don't know if I've ever known any artist that has been so prolific in my life as much as Nall has. So I'm a huge fan of his work. I've always have been, but at this point, after looking at the work and taking this small bit of time to study his work, I'm just totally enamored with what he has done, and more so enamored with the amount of work that he has produced in his lifetime. He is not only painted, he's a master printer, a master draftsman, he's designed pieces, and he's had has an incredibly rich life. And to be able to walk into that museum and to be able to see the sort of the narratives of his life there on display, I just think is really remarkable.
And that narrative translates to the book that folks can pick up through the Office of Development here. Ed, I want to thank you for joining me today and giving us this background in this book, and that connects to the International Art Center, the Nall Museum. Ed, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on today's edition of Trojan Talk.